Viserys Targaryen, the Beggar King of A Song of Ice and Fire, is one of the most tragic characters in the series, and I refuse to let you say otherwise. In A Song of Ice and Fire, it is so easy to just disregard Viserys as a character entirely. He's in the story for such a short time. One season in the show, but not the entirety of it, and only one of the books in the entire series. And even then, we don't even get a POV chapter for him. We only experience him and his madness through the eyes of his younger sister, Daenerys. Very often, it's easy to just dismiss Viserys as Daenerys' older, arrogant, entitled, crazy, and abusive brother. Which is true, especially when you only go through the show, and all you get are those negative qualities from such a horrible man. Which makes you question why anyone would want him to be king, even if he is rightful. You cheer every time he gets checked, and practically count down the seconds to his demise. But as deserved as that was, I can't help but sympathize with and feel sorry for Viserys Targaryen. While it's easy to just write him off as this hopeless megalomaniac, in the books there is a depth and tragedy to Viserys' story that can make you see him in a whole new light. A lot of who he is and how he treated his sister was shaped by his early childhood. Now, of course, I want to preface in this video that none of what I say is an excuse for any of Viserys' actions. It's simply an explanation of what caused him to be this way, and an expansion of his mindset as we dive into why the life and death of the man who would have been Viserys III, if things had gone differently, is pretty sad. Viserys was born the second son of Mad King Aerys Targaryen. It's said that he was born small, but even so, he was still full of life. During this time, King Aerys was extremely paranoid when it came to his youngest son, and refused to let anyone be alone with him, not even his own mother, Rhaella. Though it's said that as he got older, and Rhaella was able to take on a more active role in his life, she actually tried to shield Viserys from his father's madness and protect him. Though in the books, Barristan Selmy says that from a young age, Viserys always displayed some traces of Targaryen madness. With words like that, it seems like Viserys was doomed from the start. But I kind of disagree here. We don't really know what passed for Targaryen madness when it comes to the likes of Barristan Selmy, as he doesn't really talk much about his time serving the Targaryens, unless it has to deal with Rhaegar. So Viserys could have done a myriad of things, thrown a tantrum, attacked someone, or maybe pulled a Joffrey and killed a pregnant cat. But I digress. I wouldn't put it past his older self to do something like that, but for whatever pre-existing conditions he may have had thanks to his family tree being more of a family wreath, from the beginning of his life, Viserys was pretty much screwed over by his father, and to an extent, his older brother Rhaegar as well. It's a funny thought in all honesty, because Viserys in his older years seems to revere his father and older brother, believing that they could do no wrong, and as the blood of the dragon, they were entitled to anything and everything. In fact, the world owed it to them, refusing to acknowledge how their selfish actions really ended his own life before it could ever truly begin. In the case of King Aerys, he alienated and enraged the entire realm, turning them against his family, by burning lords he didn't like and insulting his most loyal vassals. He did a lot to earn the ire of his people, a little to earn their love and loyalty. Then Prince Rhaegar went and made things worse by starting the rebellion. By running away with Lyanna Stark, he aided in the downfall and destruction of his own family. As Brandon Stark and his father Rickard tried to get her back and were killed for it by King Aerys. Then, to make sure no one retaliated, he tried to force another powerful vassal, Jon Arryn of the Vale, to kill two of his charges, a young Eddard Stark and Robert Baratheon, boys he saw as his own sons. So naturally, unwilling to kill whom he sees as his own family, he starts a war just to protect them. And this is the beginning of the end for life as Viserys knew it. So imagine this, being around 7 to 8 years old, and not only slowly watching your family fall apart, but die one by one, thanks to a series of their poor decisions. First, your brother dies fighting a traitor. Then, just to survive, your father sends you away to Dragonstone with your pregnant mother, so you won't get caught up in the gruesome violence. Then, while you're isolated, you hear the news of your family's demise, helpless to do anything about it. Your father is stabbed in the back by a man who by all means should have been the most loyal to him, having literally sworn to protect the king's life, even at the cost of his own. Then your sister-in-law, your niece, and nephew are killed by the bannerman of a lord your father once called his hand and best friend. Subjected to the same fate as your older brother, who by all means seemed untouchable some days, at least according to most people who knew him. Then your mother, the last of the family you have left, and the one person who arguably loved you the most and provided for you in spite of your crazy father, dies too, leaving you with an infant sister who has the luxury of not even being able to understand or even comprehend the travesty that has befallen your family. Now, at such a young age, you're left with the knowledge that you and this little bundle, too young to know what's going on, are the very last of your kind. Of course, not knowing that your brother secretly sired a son with the woman that helped doom your family. And before you can even grieve the loss of your mother, you're forced to flee the only home you've ever known and go to an otherwise foreign land because the guy who killed your brother wants you dead too. So at this tender age, Viserys can only stand by as his family falls apart. He's left an orphan, hunted by traitors, and things only get worse from there. He has somewhat of a peaceful life in Essos, alongside his sister, who at the start of this had a really good relationship with him. But things take a dark turn when their protector, Willem Dari, dies, and then their servants take everything that they have, which forces them to live life on the streets. And if that wasn't bad enough, Viserys is now left being the only provider for his little sister. He travels around Essos with her, sometimes as guests for powerful people who are more than happy to host the remnants of House Targaryen. But eventually, as time passes, the importance, the gravitas of who they were becomes more of a novelty and meaningless to these people. The weight of the Targaryen name is gradually lost, and these people could care less about these children that have nowhere to go. So Viserys is forced onto the streets with his sister, forced to live like a beggar, all the while knowing, or believing at least, that he was meant to be more. To be a king, the last heir to a dynasty centuries old that shaped the continent of Westeros. That's a lot for a boy this young to deal with. Viserys should be out playing somewhere, taking life on easy mode, and yet he's forced to endure all of this trauma, being orphaned and displaced, worrying about where his and his sister's next meal is going to come from, never sure if the next day is going to be their last. He wanders the world paranoid, and who wouldn't be at this point? The people closest to you have all died, and from your point of view, it's because of the people closest to them. They were betrayed by friends, people who swore oaths to them, and you yourself experienced this firsthand when your own servants, people meant to take care of you, and whom you've done no wrong to whatsoever, have no issue stealing from children and leaving them destitute to starve on the streets. People may think that Viserys is angry at the world for no reason, but in reality, the world has screwed him over time and time again. Then, just so he and his sister can feed themselves, he's forced to sell his mother's crown, the last remnant of his old life, of the woman who loved and shielded him, just so they can live. Daenerys describes this act in the books as what truly broke her brother Viserys, taking away all of his joy and leaving only rage in its place. When you look at all the things that happened to Viserys as a child, it's really no wonder that he turned out the way he did. This cruel, abusive, vindictive, and delusional monster. It's not the result of Targaryen madness, just trauma and pain stemming from repeated loss and suffering, coupled with the weight of expectations. I mean, imagine going through your life believing that you're the last of your kind. That changes you mentally. It breeds this idea that you have to survive by any means necessary. And in the case of Viserys, it's also your duty to, as your father's son, your mother's. Now couple that with the knowledge that you were actually robbed of your rightful life. You were meant to be raised in a palace as a prince. Then you were meant to be a king, named heir by your father, and crowned by your mother. But instead, you're forced from your home and made to suffer on the streets just so you and your sister don't die. When you think about that, can you really blame Viserys for being so desperate to go back home? Not to even justify what he did to Dany in an effort to do this, by marrying her off and forcing her to be a political tool, but with the context like this, it's really understandable why he would go this far. If you were a child and you vividly remembered your home being taken and your family killed, would you not do everything you could just to go back home, to the place that you were told was rightfully yours and had been in your family for generations? Would you not want justice against those who took it, and them, from you? Then, in a strange way, familial honor and duty also demands that you do just that, adding to the pressure you felt all these years since you were a child and had no one to rely on. Viserys spent most of his life believing that he was the last hope of his family, and that weight broke him in the end, so it's no surprise that he turned out how he did. Now, of course, you could say that it doesn't matter what Viserys went through. Daenerys went through the same thing and she turned out fine. And while that is technically true, technical is all it really is. Not to dismiss any trauma that she went through in Essos, because there was plenty of that, but it's different in comparison to Viserys. Unlike her brother, Dany has no idea what her family was like. She never saw their father, never spoke to their brother. She doesn't know what it was like to be held by their mother. She never grew up in the Red Keep. In some ways, that's a tragedy on its own, but in some ways, it's also a mercy, because she didn't have to watch her family fall apart one after the other. She didn't have to grow up believing that the future of her family solely depended on what she did with her life. She didn't grow up with a younger sibling that depended on her for everything. This is why things are different between the two of them, as Daenerys and her brother have two different definitions of what home is. For Viserys, it was the Red Keep where he was raised, and for Dany, it was a house with a red door and a lemon tree beneath her window, where she lived with her brother before Willem Dari died. Because she didn't know what life was like before, the pain doesn't affect her the same way as her brother. Viserys spent most of his life believing that there was a grand purpose for his existence, that he had to fulfill it, but when he tries to, no one really takes him seriously. Like Daenerys, when she tries making plans to take Westeros, she faces opposition, because she's done nothing to inspire faith in her cause, like we saw in Qarth. The same goes for Viserys. Everyone dumbs him down to this bumbling fool who has no hope of ever taking the throne. But while that may be true, perhaps if he'd actually grown up with proper guidance, if Willem Dari had never died, or Barristan Selmy had been the one to raise them, he could have potentially developed into a possible leader. Of course, nothing is ever really guaranteed, though. Still, it is sad that Viserys seemed screwed from the very start, based on the trauma he experienced, and by the time he could have learned something and found a way to gather people to his cause to take back the Seven Kingdoms, it was too late for him. He was too far gone, and ultimately ends up getting himself killed, which I find to be one of the most tragic parts of his story, if I'm being honest. Of course, Viserys really brought it upon himself by threatening his little sister with death alongside her unborn child in front of her savage husband. But the point still stands, in my opinion. Imagine spending your entire life struggling to survive, clinging to the fact that you are a king and your life means something, only to have your little sister, the one you sacrificed for so she could eat, start achieving your goals like inspiring loyalty and devotion in people without even trying. Then your fate falls into her hands. Your life is decided by the girl you raised, the girl you did whatever you could to ensure would live just one more day, have something to eat, and have a safe place away from assassins. You gave up your mother's crown for her, and if what Daenerys says is true, the last bit of happiness he had left. That's heartbreaking to think about. Viserys gave up his happiness so that she could have a life, just for her to take his later on. Now, as I said, I am in no way defending Viserys or his actions towards his sister, and he did this to himself, he definitely did, but it's still food for thought. Before he went crazy, he did everything to ensure Daenerys lived and got killed for it later. No good deed goes unpunished. Now she gets to fulfill the destiny that you could argue was meant for him. They'll sing songs of the Dragon Queen, of her trials and triumphs, but will anyone sing for Viserys? Will anyone recognize that at one point, he was just a boy doing the best he could to preserve what was left of his family? Or will he simply go down in history as another Targaryen fool, filled with grand delusions, mad ravings, and little else? But either way, these are just my thoughts on Viserys Targaryen, the Beggar King. Crazy as he was, it still sucks that his life was basically ruined from the start by the same family he appears so keen to idolize and defend. You guys let me know your thoughts down below, though. Hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tell me your thoughts down below, and I will see you all next time.